It's really kind of you to take time out. Okay, we are now live. Well, hopefully we're going live. This is a very special community Q&A. We have local MP Crispin Blunt attending very kindly. Does everyone want to? We are now live. We are live now. Yeah, we are live on Facebook. This is a very special community Q&A. Oh, getting a bit. We have. Hang on. Getting a bit of. Crispin Blunt. There
That's because he needs to be introduced twice.
and with a tuck into the forelock.
Yeah, doing a little bit of talking to myself there, not too unusual.
Yes, I've done too much forelock tucking myself, as you can see.
Is everyone okay to introduce themselves before we start?
Well, we'll start with the man of seniority here. Away you go, Crispin.
Well, hi, everybody. And some terrific opportunity to answer questions. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm Crispin Blunt. I'm the MP for the constituency of Reigate and have been so since 1997.
My name is Bob Gardner. I'm the county councillor for Merstham and Banstead South and have been so for the last 7.5 years.
Councillor Mark Brunt. I'm one of the 3 councillors representing on the Borough Council the new Hooley, Merstham and Netherm ward, and I have to remind myself how to say that to get it in the right order. And I've been a councillor in Merstham since 2004.
Fantastic.
And finally, Frank Kelly, and I have also one of the Hooley, Merstham and Netherm councillors. I've been a councillor for 9 years, and I'm deputy mayor.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again for attending. So should we start off with some questions from the community then? Is everyone ready? Okay, so I'll start off with one from Ruth Reed. She's asking MP Blunt, I'd like to ask what he feels he could bring to Merstham. What are his qualities, his strengths, and how does he view Merstham? Having been described over the years as underprivileged, what can he offer Merstham going forward?
Well, Merstham's obviously mixed, and you've got the 2 halves of it with the village of South Merstham has obviously seen significant developments at the southern end of it with Park 25 and watercolour, changing the nature of the whole community quite substantially in the course of the last decade or more. Together with the London County Council Overspill Estate, as it was originally produced back however many decades ago now, dealing with the need to transfer population out of London in order to improve the absolutely catastrophic housing conditions in London. And Merstham has its own flavour, part of the community. I'm very proud over the last 23 years seeing the change actually in Merstham and its representation since I was first selected here to be the Conservative candidate back in 1997. In those days, the Conservatives didn't even compete in the elections in Merstham other than put a name on a ballot paper. And I'm, today we have the council leader is one of your representatives. And in addition to that, unsurprisingly, it's meant that 3 Conservatives absolutely committed to making sure that Merstham gets a fair deal out of all the areas in the locality, because that we understand the reasons, and there are 2 points in the constituency. The Merstham estate and the Preston estate up in Tadworth, where for historic housing reasons, housing policy reasons, which I don't think anyone would want to replicate today, but they owe their history, there is a concentration of social challenges that have meant and deserve that there should be special investment in both those communities. And I'm really proud of the way that Mark and his colleagues on the borough, supported by and enabled by the county council as well, have worked to address that. What's the current agenda around Merstham is obviously part of the same challenge as all areas, particularly around Gatwick. Recovering from COVID is going to be an important issue, and I'm very pleased to be working with Claire Cortina, who's the new MP for East Surrey, where we put together an economic task force to focus the minds of people like the LEP, the Local Enterprise Partnership, as well as the County Council and the Borough Council and Tandridge District Council are part of that organisation too, to make sure that the strategic focus locally is not just on Gatwick and Crawley, who have been the most impacted of any town in the country by the effect of COVID, but to make sure that we're thinking about East Surrey in its widest sense, and to make sure there is attention being given to the recovery here as well.
Thanks very much. That's a very comprehensive answer. Just leading on from that then, from some of the themes you were discussing, we have a question from Jennifer Barrett, and she's asking, I would be interested in how MP Blunt intends to fight for Reigate and Banstead, and more specifically Merstham as part of the government's levelling up. I don't want party spiel. I want to know what he is actually doing and what specific plans he has.
The most important strategic issue for the constituency of Reigate, which is about 70% of the borough of Reigate and Banstead. But the thing so it's the whole of the borough of Reigate and Banstead, but not including Hawley and 2 wards up in the north, Tattenhams and Nork. And the constituency is London's Greenbelt. It literally sits, the northern boundary is the boundary with Sutton, and the southern boundary is the boundary with the constituencies of Mole Valley and East Surrey. But it happens to be the southern boundary is where the London Greenbelt ends. That is an absolutely essential protection for our environment. And what the Greenbelt ought to mean is that undeveloped space in that area is not developed, is not used. And indeed, you need special permission from the Secretary of State if you are going to break those rules. And we have done so. In fact, we did so in the case of Watercolour and Park 25, where it was decided that in order to make strategic sense of the access to Holmesthorpe Industrial Estate and to make sure that we get the access to that estate under the railway line, that it was then necessary to develop the number of houses there, which were formerly a breach of the Greenbelt rules. And I think that I know there are issues around both estates, and particularly around some of the quality of the provision in Park 25, for example. But I think most people would regard Watercolour certainly as a pretty reasonable addition to the built environment for the people of Redhill. And it's that quality of the growing built environment is our legacy to generations to come. If we do not use the protection that the Greenbelt offers us to make sure that we get development in the places that we want it will be successive generations who won't have the opportunity to live in the same quality of life that we have in the borough of Reigate and Banstead. So it's that if you're asking me what the number one issue is, and I think it would be the number one issue for any member of Parliament for Reigate who understands the long-term, appreciates the long-term trends, it's actually sustaining the protections, the privilege of being London's Greenbelt provides. And we've got to remember, it's not our green belt, it's London's. And so when people put this in context, what you've got to think about is that in 1945, if you superimposed a map of Los Angeles over London, they would be roughly the same size. If you did that today, if London had grown at the same rate as Los Angeles, it would now go from Cambridge to Brighton. And you would have continuous development all the way from the central of London, all that way north and all that way south. Well, that is the strategic purpose that the Green Belt serves. And we're lucky enough to live in that space, and we must be determined to protect it, not only for ourselves, but actually for the whole country. This is London's Green Belt is a national asset. And protecting the quality of the environment here, together with meeting the some of the natural demand for housing, but not all of it, because that's going to get you development in the wrong place in the country, is the balance has got to be struck by the local planning authority. And so, as I've always said to Mark and his colleagues on the local authority, if you do nothing else, invest in the finest planning officers you can find in the country, because their job in defending defending a built environment is number one. So that's if you ask me what am I going to do for it, that's number one on the list. And right now we're engaged in a very tough battle on it. Okay,
thank you for that. Mark, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I think if I'm not going to talk about the green belt, but I think if the questioner is really asking about the levelling up, what the government calls the levelling up agenda, if that's really about making sure there's fair distribution of resources and investment, etc., then I think one of the most critical things is that they're not the needs of this part of Surrey and Merstham in particular are not overlooked, because there is a tendency sometimes for governments of all different political colours and shapes to view that this part of the southeast is very affluent, doesn't need any investment, doesn't need any support. And I think that's something that we need to continue to remind, and I certainly do through my role as council leader, to remind the government that we need investment. And actually, probably we need investment, particularly around economic development and jobs, as much, if not more, through COVID, following COVID, than a lot of other areas, because our economy has been hit very, very hard, and because the need for some more of the lower paid jobs, we need investment in those jobs for our young people. So for me, it is about making sure that the needs of this part of Surrey are not overlooked and are not considered that they don't need the same level of focus as those in the north and other parts of the country.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, thank you for getting to the heart of that. We're going to have a bit of a change of pace. We're going to have a more locally based question here, if that's okay with local councillors. Helen Tucker is asking about updates regarding Brook Road and the depot following the flooding, whether there is any information found on the ownership and any chances of resolutions, worried about weather changing and chances of flooding again. Thank you.
Well, if I can come in on that, we're talking about the Network Rail land, I assume.
Yeah, I assume that's what you're talking about. Yep.
Were caused by that. In fact, last week we got Network Rail to agree that they will be putting in some bunding along there to actually prevent a further reoccurrence of the flooding issue. And we've been battling with them to to fund the damage that was done on the footpath up there at Malmston Crescent. And they finally agreed and funded that, and we are now out to get a contractor to undertake the work and then put in a row of bollards there to prevent their vehicles from doing any further damage. And I believe that there is moves also with Network Rail to get them to use another entrance so that their vehicles will not be queuing up their early hours in the morning, ticking over, waiting to get into the depot. So it's good news there.
Thanks, Bob.
If I can just say a little bit as well.
Of course.
I did have a meeting with residents that were affected by this about a month or so ago. I have spoken to a Network Rail. Mm-hmm. I've gone to their regional area. At first, they were agreeing that this plot of land is theirs, and they were happy to work with us to do some work on it.
Okay, that's great.
Then I had an email during the week saying it's not their land. It's registered land.
Right.
So I've actually got. I'm trying to get an appointment with them to come down because I need them to come and actually see the area it is.
Yeah.
And the issues had, because obviously I've had pictures and videos from residents bailing out their houses, which we don't want. We don't need that.
Yeah.
So what we need them to do is we need them to agree that if the land leading from Brook Road to the depot is theirs on the right-hand side, then they've got to do something about that. They've already agreed on Malmstone Avenue that they need to repair the damage they've done.
Yeah.
But it's this little small bit of land, and what we don't want to get to another situation with rain driving down, being swept off the depot, because they obviously don't want the rain on their own depot because it's going to damage their product. Having it swept out into the road and having it affect people's lives. So we are still pushing to get them to agree or not agree. If they don't want the land, then that's fine. We can take it over and we can look at ways of doing something for residents for that area. But what we, again, like Bob said, we don't want cars parked there at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on their telephones and blighting people's lives, because you know, we need everyone to work together. Yeah.
No, I do remember that being a pattern actually with National Rail. They're not taking responsibility for that area of land, so that's definitely been a history there. Thanks, Frank.
And the problem is, it's not just Network Rail. You've got Network Rail, and you've got
multitude of
actually operating as well. So it's a lot of people to get together to agree how to move forwards, and with all these things, they do take time. So
okay, thanks, Frank. Okay, so coming back to MP Blunt, if that's okay, I have a question here from Keith Paxton, and he'd like to know, as many jobs have gone not to return, will there be an improvement in welfare support? Excuse me, or will we see austerity 2.0, making the poorest pay for the pandemic when so many wealthy people have got richer? I'd love to, for instance, see the extra £20 on universal credit at least extended, if not made permanent, and legacy benefits like ESA adjusted to match it. Does MP Blunt have any thoughts on those points?
National emergency, like so, it's obviously an international emergency, but everyone is seen to be in this together, and it's very important that the whole of society then carries with them those who are least equipped to cope with the challenges that we're being faced with. And the government has significantly increased, I think the figure was referred to about the £1,000 annual increase in universal credit levels. That's £1,000 a year. I understand that I believe that is a permanent uptick in that figure. I stand to be corrected. But there has been with the extension of free school meals and the rest, there have been any number of measures designed to help people out, and that's appropriate. At the same time, there has been important focus on sustaining the economy and thinking about the future and thinking about the changed economy that we are going to have. And if one looks at the detail that the government measures have been addressing, only the last couple of days I've been looking at a scheme around future funding, which is created, that the British Business Bank has been created in order to lend money to the new emerging companies that might have just got going in the last 2 or 3 years, who are then finding their development interrupted by COVID, and then the freezing of the investment environment where they're looking to, at that point, to grow and to raise capital. And there they've put in schemes where new companies who've received investments of the sort of set up with a sort of order of £250,000 to get a small business going in the kind of entrepreneurial space around new industries that are important to us. If they get new investment, the government will match that initially with a loan, which will then convert into equity in the company. That gets up to £5 million of new investment. So it's doubling the investment in these new and emerging companies. Now, anyone who's in that space look out for it, because you've got until the 30th of November to apply for it. But that strikes me as a really generous scheme. You've then also had the obviously all the measures right across the economy, the furlough measures and the rest, to sustain us through the worst period of this, as well as the loans to companies. And these have been life-saving measures for the economy. And in the end, people's success and happiness and everything else is going to be derived from the fact that they have the satisfaction of being able to provide for themselves and their family if they can, and that they have the opportunity to do so. And that means a functioning free market economy that is then going to enable them to go as far as they can with the talents that they've got. And this is the really tough balance that the government is trying to make now between closing down the economy in order to close down the epidemic, with enabling the economy to continue and sustain all the public services that we need, including, obviously, then all the benefits and support that we want to give people in our society who are not as who either need that support systemically because of their own circumstances, or whether they've arrived at a point in their lives when they need to turn to the rest of us for help.
Thank you for that, MP Blunt. Just following on from that theme very quickly, Keith also adds, British music, art, movies, games and TV are some of the most loved in the world, and by letting it all fade away unsupported seems very short-sighted. I believe he's referring to funding for cultural programs and the arts. Do you have any opinions on that in the current environment?
Well, the government has provided a very the last tranche, 1.57 billion, I think, from memory of the briefing. Now, quite a lot of that money has gone to the institutions and the buildings and everything else that provide, if you like, the hardcore part of the artistic establishment, where people do things, and it's through that spine that they're looking to keep those institutions going, so that there then will be theatres and the rest for people to return to in order to perform in. But I know this firsthand. My daughter works in casting, and of course, it's the whole of that part of the arts industry has come to a grinding halt. Awful lot of people in that part of the economy are employed on a self-employed basis, and we very quickly made sure that the financial support applied to self-employed people as well as to those who are furloughed furloughed out of their employment. So that applied to the creative sector. But I don't want to. There's not much sugar to put on this pill in these circumstances. If people can't go and collectively watch things because of the impact it'll have on the whole nation's health, then the arts who rely on people collectively watching things are in a pretty tough place. And that's why it's important to get, hopes and praise we get a vaccine and everything else, and we get back to normal as quickly as reasonably possible.
Thank you for that answer. Yeah, Mark. Yeah, of course.
And Marcus, just more locally. So obviously the council owns and runs the Harlequin in Red
a really
Hill.
important resource. Yeah.
As a lot of residents will know, we've turned that into the community support centre during the first COVID outbreak. But what we've really tried to do is, to get that back up and running as quick as possible. So we are one of the few cinemas that are operating, and we put investment into that to try and keep the arts going as best we can. And we've done some really good stuff, I think, around getting local people, particularly local young people, involved in talent.
Yeah.
More virtually, but it is something that we're going to have to do more of. And I know we applied for some funding from the government, which we were unsuccessful in terms of keeping the for additional funding for the theatre. But I know other organisations I'm involved in have actually received funding from the government for keeping museums, etc., that would have closed because they rely completely on visitor numbers coming through to keep them going. But just going back to Keith's main question was about benefits, but also about loss of jobs.
Yeah.
My experience is people don't, for those people who have lost their jobs, it's not the benefits they want, it's another job. They don't want to rely on benefits. And I think that is an area where we can, we have to continue to invest. And I don't think it's a money issue. I think the government are there to do it. We actually need the ideas and innovation from people on what we can do to generate new skills and new jobs. So, if I look at one example that we've been involved in, and Crispin is aware of this, East Surrey College would like to develop a new school for so what they call sustainable construction. So when this is the building industry developing the skills to do solar, to do construction that is low carbon, environmentally friendly, and that's something that we are currently working to get funding through the government to help them to build that new school, so that again we can retrain people to be out and go and deliver those sort of projects, because we know that that's something that we want to do both for the sustainability, but also in terms of generating the new jobs for people going forward, rather than some of the old jobs that unfortunately may not be there in the future.
Sure. And you were talking about East Surrey College there. Are those apprenticeships that people can apply for now? So
East Surrey College do a lot of apprenticeships. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the status of those apprenticeships are. But the sustainable construction school that they're looking to build, we're trying to, and Crispin's well aware of it, working well with us, and also the East Surrey MP. They need a couple of million to actually build that school, and that's something we're actively working on at the moment, because I think people want jobs. They don't want the benefits. They really want the jobs to go and support their families.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So on a more local theme now, thank you to you both for answering that. Joe Oram, I hope I'm getting your name right, Joe. On a local theme, I would like to know why temporary traffic lights were put up in both directions on the road by Reigate Heath on the 14th of October. No workmen all day, but several miles of tailback causing ridiculous problems. Why?
I'm going to pass.
Anyone care to field that one, or?
I don't think we know unless Bob knows the exact, because it's Reigate Heath is on the other side of Reigate. But I think it's worth noting, part of the problem is that the utility companies are allowed to put in roadworks. They don't have to get anyone's permission to do it. They have a right to do that, and it is really frustrating. We had some in Merstham a couple of weeks ago in the middle of the high street. I get quite a lot of emails about the roadworks. Well, those were actually emergency roadworks due to electric cable fault. But Bob, I don't know if you have any more view on the problem, particularly around utility companies and that perception that they're not doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest challenges we've had in the past is that utility companies, by law, can notify us that they have a major emergency, and therefore we cannot stop them carrying out roadworks. However, what we introduced now is a lane charging scheme, so that they tell us how long those roadworks are going to be there. And if they go beyond that date, we start charging them. So it's amazing how quickly they actually get the work done efficiently and on time. But with these particular roadworks, I believe it was public utilities. So again, we couldn't plan or control it. They tell us it's an emergency and we have to grant them that license.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Okay, so coming back to MP Blunt again, if that's okay. I have a question from Angela Bishop.
You can call me Crispin if it's easier.
MP Blunt sounds... Okay, so one for you, Crispin, if that's all right. I would like to know his stance on food poverty for children and whether he will back Marcus Rashford's call for support to be extended throughout school holidays. I know you were talking about the school meals before. In my opinion, he's done very little when this area has needed support. So we'd love to hear that after all these years in a safe seat, he will put his neck on the line for once and stand up for those who need his support.
Well, that's a charmingly put question. Thank you very much. And congratulations to Marcus Rashford for the attention he brought for the need of this in, I think it was over half term and then into the summer holiday period for families. But in the end, all of these things have got to be sustainable and they've got to be efficient in how they deliver relief to people. And the what appears to have come out in the handling of this crisis is just what a great reform universal credit has been. This has been a benefit change which, until Ian Duncan Smith became the Secretary of State in 2010, every government said this would be a good idea to do all this, to sort out the benefit system, the confusion of different benefits requiring different agencies administering them, that the benefit system needed a complete overhaul. And we did it, and it was hugely difficult, a bureaucratic challenge to deliver. But as a consequence, we've got we appear to have a benefit system that is coping much better than many other equivalent systems in other countries. And to the inequality in society is never going to go away unless you move to a system of equality of outcome, which is then going to require a massively authoritarian system in order to deliver it and put it into effect. And what we've learnt is that equality of opportunity is actually what properly counts. And people who have been disadvantaged then deserve proper support in order to be able to exercise that equality of opportunity. And then you've got to try and provide that ladder opportunity for everybody to be able to climb up. And of course, all societies start in different places, and you ideally want people to feel that they've got a real stake in their society, and that that they have a fair roll of the dice through their talents and abilities to be able to get on and provide for themselves. And that, of course, is I suppose the core difference between the approach of people particularly on the centre right and those on the centre left. In the end, we meet in the middle at some point, because everyone in society has got to be looked after, and there's got to be proper resources to look after them. But where's your priority going to be? And I suppose for most people on the centre right of the spectrum, represented in the UK by the Conservative Party, we're very conscious that if you don't have a cake to carve up, there's nothing to give anybody. Sure. But if you concentrate on making sure that you can get as big a cake as possible and enabling as many people as possible to contribute to the delivery of that by giving them the freedom to exercise entrepreneurship and talents and their opportunity to succeed, through that success, they then carry an awful lot of people with them. But if you are much more interested in making sure that everyone is equal and that everything's properly and fairly distributed, you then run the danger of squashing the life out of the entrepreneurial part of the economy, where people then think it's really not worth it. I'm taxed too much, I can't be bothered, and don't invest their enterprise in their own success and indeed the success of others. Of course, to present either party as an extremist on one wing or the other within a proper democratic system is, of course, ludicrous. In the end, we all meet. Everyone recognises there are duties and responsibilities for fairness, and there are duties and responsibilities to sustain a functioning market economy. And there are balances to be struck. The balances to be struck in slightly different places. Actually, in a modern society, not very different places between the two parties. So I'll just be careful when one is asking and drafting questions like the one you did. we don't want to get to a society, and I think we've seen in the United States recently, where people are terribly divided between poles, and it horrifies me the way politics has developed in the United States. I respect and admire many of my Labour colleagues in the House of Commons for their contribution to public service and the rest. I would hope that they would regard me as a friend, and we work together on many things. And there are actually in politics in the United Kingdom many more things that unite us actually than divide us. We have the same sense of public duty here. It's exercised in different ways, of course it is, and we're competing for people's support. So there's always emphasis on the division where we're not the same, because that's the bit we're trying to emphasize in order to differentiate ourselves to elections. But I think a little more, and sometimes it's easier to deliver unity and that sense of unity and purpose locally. And I think Reagan and Banstead have done a very good job of it.
Thanks for that. That's actually a really good way to end that answer, because we can get everyone involved, hopefully, with the next question, which comes from Ali.
Marcus.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to add a little bit. Sorry, if I can add a little bit to that.
No, of course. Yeah. Sorry. No. Sorry.
It is our ultimate goal to not have food poverty wherever we are.
Absolutely.
And we saw it this year because as you saw, I was able to volunteer at the Merstham Mixed Cafe when they did the meals for families in Merstham.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you for that.
Well, no, it was amazing to see it, and it was amazing to meet families that I've never met before, and listen to some of the problems. Yeah, it would be great if we didn't have to have that sort of thing. If we didn't have to have the food banks, and we didn't have to have the food sharing that happens at Merstham Mixed and that Reigate and Banstead did during the COVID problems. But I think what we need to do is we need to make sure that, one, people are aware that there is help out there for them, and that they take advantage of it. Because I know when I helped out at the food sharing and the meals, there were a lot of families that signed up that never took advantage of it. So, it's great that we can have that help, and it's amazing that government do support and do channel things as much as possible. But we need to make sure that people almost take ownership of it and say, if I need help, I've got to make sure that I take it. Because otherwise it's a bottomless pit.
Yeah.
Government can keep saying to us, yes, we'll help with this, and we'll help to give you this money or this support. But if people don't take it, it's wasted.
Sure.
It means that you haven't got the money to help someone else.
Yeah, you're saying that it's important that we engage with these people and make them aware of the services so they can access them on a regular basis.
Well, it's also about community liaison. For the best will in the world, we have 3 councillors in Merstham and a county councillor and obviously an MP. But we don't see everything, and we don't see everyone. So we need community groups to come out and say, help us, let us help you to help everyone else.
Sure.
And that's the only way we go forward, especially in a place like Merstham, which has essentially the 3 parts. It has the £1 million houses, and it has those people that need more and more help.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only way we can do it going forward.
Sure. Thanks, Frank. That's some good points there. So we're just going to move on to something that hopefully everyone can have an opinion on. Ali Elliott asks, please ask MP Blunt to look at our roads. The majority of them are diabolical. Other towns and villages near us seem to have received a lot more attention. I'm guessing everyone can field that question.
No one wants to go first, though.
The subject was roads.
As I can probably come in on
County
a
council
lot of that. I can have to say that going around the county and going around the UK, the condition of our roads is pretty poor. We in the county council, as you know, we get a certain amount of funding from the rates, and out of every pound that we collect, 85 pence in the pound goes to adult and social care. out of the balance of the 15 pence, we then have to spend on roads, education, libraries, and the general other infrastructure. So we don't have a great deal of money. We are doing our best, and you will see that where a road is reported as being substandard, or there is a pothole, and there is a rule of thumb that's applied, which tends to be 40 millimetres. If a pothole or a damage to a road is less than 40 millimetres, if the resident actually goes onto the Surrey County Council website and reports it, they get a reference number. People go out, they actually assess the road, they identify it, they put in a works repair plan, and then when the works are carried out, they actually get emailed back and told when it's repaired. But it does take the responsibility of somebody to report it. I report, if somebody emails me, I report it straight away. But we do need everybody, if they spot a defect in a road or a footpath, to actually go onto the council website and report it. Because to email myself or one of the borough councillors, it's like us sitting under a funnel and everyone chucking the notifications to us. We can't possibly respond quick enough to actually fulfill the requirements of the residents.
Sure.
It drives me nuts. I tell you, I cannot express my displeasure at seeing poor road surfaces or poor footpaths. And the highlight of our week is when I, in the evening, say to my wife, come on, let's go for a walk. We spend time going out checking footpaths, roads and drains. And it's not the most romantic end to an evening, I can assure you. But if the residents help us to report the issues, the borough councillors, the county councillors, and indeed Crispin as the MP, we do work very hard to try and maximise the spend for the residents on our roads.
Thanks, Bob.
And there is one national funding systemic problem which Surrey is a particular victim of, is that much of the national formula funding for that goes to the local authorities who have responsibility for all the roads outside the national road network itself is done by the length of road there is. Well, of course, if you're in Surrey and your roads are being hammered by the amount of traffic and intensity of use that there is in our county, being so central to the economy of the country, which reflects in how hard our roads are used, then that formula does need adjusting. Now, Surrey's MPs have got together and trying to reinforce the case to county councillor making that formula needs adjustment, because plainly, as Bob has pointed out, with the amount of money available, there isn't an adequate amount of money for the to address the maintenance required on Surrey's road networks, given how hard our roads are used, because our network is so central to the economy and is in that sense driven very hard.
Marcus, not specifically about, I know the question was around the terrible state of the roads.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to try to defend that. But I think the other thing that really does concern me, and I know a lot of other residents, is actually about the speed that we see a lot of drivers going around Merston.
That is a constant issue. Yeah, thank you for
and there are a lot of physical, we can put physical measures in, and we do have speed humps on Bletchley Road, as you know, and also on Nutfield Road. But the thing we have to do is actually change drivers' attitudes to driving at speed, because there's things that you can do, and what we've seen, Bletchley Road is a really good example where you've got speed humps on Bletchley Road, but what do drivers do? They go down Worsted just to get around them. Or they line up the vehicles so that they can go across the cushions without causing their wheels to go over the hump. we have to make driving at speed in residential areas as socially unacceptable as drinking and driving is these days. And that requires an attitude change. And, you know, government can do a lot, but we as a community have to really say it's not acceptable, because a lot of the people who are driving fast live in our community. They're not people coming through. They're people who we live next door to. So we as a community have a lot to do to actually make speeding in Merstham unacceptable, as well as, you know, speed watch is great and stuff like that. But, you know, these are our children that are potentially going to get knocked down. But if you look at it, a lot of it's our people live locally who are driving, and they're the ones that are ignoring the speed signs. And we need them to really think about the impact that they're having.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Okay, so just kind of piggybacking on the road issue, this is from Sue Rogers, who I believe has asked a multiple number of questions about this exact issue. She's asking about the state of the pavement from Station Alley way up to Malmstone. Been brought up before, but still not done. Also alleyways on Radstock, Huddleston and Mansfield, still in a bad and dangerous condition. Really would appreciate an answer to these issues and getting them fixed. I know that Sue has emailed the council about this before, and has also contacted us on Twitter, so it has been a constant issue.
Do you know, I walk down these alleyways, and in fact I walked down the alleyways with Councillor Kelly recently, because where we had the heavy rain recently, one of the Thames water drains was so much pressure it actually lifted it out of the footpath surface, and we reported it, and it was dealt with very quickly. There's a difference between 40 footpaths and those that have a crack in the surface that look cosmetically not very pretty, and there's a vast difference. And I think what I'm seeing is, when I've gone down to these footpaths, yes, there are some cracks and they need reporting, but again, there are other cracks that people are saying, well, my road's never been resurfaced in 20 years. But it's a concrete surface. It's not broken up. It's not damaged. It just doesn't look as pretty as a freshly tarmac surface. And I understand that. But what we need to do is to maximise where we get the benefit for our spend. And if a road is damaged and is unsafe, then we need to be dealing with it and spending our money on it. But if it's just cosmetically not very pretty, then I'd rather spend money where it's going to save damage to vehicles and stop damage to residents.
Sure.
So it's never an easy answer to a question, I'm afraid.
Right, sure. So what you're saying is the investment in the roads and pathways has to be weighed up between its function and how it actually looks aesthetically.
Absolutely. And if it is faulty, if it is dangerous, let's report it. And again, report it online. You get a reference number and they tell you when it's dealt with. They will go out and they will inspect it, because if somebody damages a vehicle in a pothole, then they can claim against the council insurance. Okay. If they trip over a footpath and they're injured, then a claim could go in against the council insurance. But unless somebody reports it, then nothing will ever be done about it, because one county councillor or one borough councillor or one member of parliament cannot walk down every single road in the whole of the borough. Sure.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. So I think we're going to have, a final question for Crispin, if that's okay. This one comes from Fyodor Dostoevsky. I'm assuming it's not the same Fyodor Dostoevsky. Mr. Blunt's long tenure would suggest an intimate knowledge of his constituents. I would be keen to understand what advice he will give Rishi Sunak when the Chancellor undoubtedly has to raise taxes post-pandemic. How will his advice to the Chancellor ensure the less fortunate in Merstham do not suffer? Thank you.
Well, I think we've probably answered that before in an earlier question about one's general approach to regarding the duties and responsibilities of obviously parliamentarians, and how they will see them depending on which political philosophy they feel most attached to. I personally believe that the responsibility resting on Rishi is absolutely enormous, because he's got to find a way of ensuring that the economy is sustained through this crisis, when the temptation is simply to pull the covers up and hide, and just stop everything. And if you just stop everything in the without the measures that he has taken, then there is no wealth to distribute. And that is the really quite startling conclusion, thought, the reality that we're being presented with, that if you stop the economy, what then? Because the money is not being generated to support people who are in need. It's not being generated to sustain the health service. It's not being generated to provide our police force and to keep us secure at home. It's not being generated to provide for the armed forces to keep us safe as a nation abroad. And so the lifeblood of the ability for us to be able to do all the things that we want to deliver our duties to our neighbours, to make sure that our neighbours, when they're in need, are being looked after, do depend on a robust, successful economy where people can get a decent return for the investment they make in building their businesses and creating the wealth which everyone needs to share. But plainly, if you're going to invest your time and effort and intellectual property and your brilliance and your ideas in schemes that are going to work and get a decent return, surprise, surprise, you might want at least some share of that, a rather bigger share of that return than handing it out to everybody. And we've seen the consequence of, if you're required to hand it out to everybody in equal amounts, that just destroys the enterprise and the entrepreneurship, and you end up with a much, much less successful economy as a consequence. And so it's getting those balances right about, and so my choice, my instinct will always be for freedom, to give people the liberty and the opportunity then to make those choices. And for me, that's the theme that then runs through, I suppose, my approach to politics generally, is give people the freedom to be themselves and to succeed, and to give them the tools in order to do it. To address that issue that is, of course, there about equality of opportunity, about the different backgrounds people have come from, and the privileges they have had through their background. But then let's remember, and this is, I suppose, the huge change in my lifetime, is that we've gone from a society that rather applauded conformity to a society that is now learning to celebrate diversity, and all the richness that brings to our society. And it's difficult to believe, sitting here in the midst of the COVID crisis and the temper of the questions that we've had. But I think we ought to be very proud, actually, of our country. The freedoms it has and the respect in this country for others is very much greater than it was, and the freedom for people to be themselves and to succeed in Britain in a way that they're not able to do in other countries, and the access that we have around the world, and the gifts that Britain has given around the world, and the relationships we have to the Commonwealth of Nations and the rest. I know the Australians say they're a lucky country. Well, I think we are. And just once or twice, it's quite good for the Brits to reflect on the fact that actually, by and large, we made a reasonably decent fist of things. I know that there's always things to improve. There's always the opportunity to point out whatever the latest challenge is. But I think, and we've seen it through the NHS and the support for all the key workers in the crisis for the last 6 months or so, and will continue, is the incredible value our public services have given. and none of those public services would be in a position to give anything if we didn't have a successful market economy to help pay for them. And it's getting all of that right. Is the challenge faced to me and my colleagues.
Thanks, Crispin. So we've slightly run out of time here, but I think just to finish, just upon the question that I think is on the minds of lots of the residents here is are you planning on visiting us anytime, Crispin? Maybe have a community Q&A in person at some point.
I would love to do that. There is a my visits, strange enough, have been minimised over the last 6 months. Not least, everyone saw the level of the contamination in the super spreader centre that was called Westminster.
Sure.
In February, March, quite rightly, that face-to-face contact between politicians and candidates in elections has been quite rightly minimised. And it's then meant that we're communicating on means like this. I'm very much looking forward to the chance to get back to normal like everyone else, and community Q&A sessions. I thoroughly enjoy, and this one I've enjoyed only just say slightly less because I can't see the people that I'm engaging with. And of course, if you're doing it in a village hall or an environment like that, then of course you can then have it's easier to have the to and fro and the actual human engagement. And that's I suppose been the most wretched thing about this whole last 6 months is a loss of human engagement for every level.
Okay, well that's a really pertinent point to end on. Thank you everyone for taking the time to get involved with our local Q&A, and special thank you to Crispin for taking the time out to answer resident questions. So
thank you for inviting me.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for everyone.
Until next time.
This, Marcus.
No, you're welcome. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Right.
Cheers,
Yeah,
guys.
very well,
See
squire,
you
Marcus.
next time.
Cheers, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.